Have you ever planted seeds in a garden or in a pot? If so, then you may remember how it seemed to take forever before those first green shoots emerged. But shortly afterwards, you saw one set of leaves and then others, and then maybe a flower started to appear. Did you ever wonder where all of those plant parts come from? How did they develop from one small seed? Well, listen and watch on to find out. Because today we're going to talk about what a seed plant is, and we'll also take a very close look at the seed itself in the next video. But that plant that was growing in your garden or the one that you put in your pot was a seed plant. And so are most of the other plants around you. In fact, seed plants outnumber seedless plants by more than 10 to 1. And you eat many seed plants. We're talking like rice and peas and squash, just for a few examples. And you wear clothes that are made from seed plants as well, like cotton and flax. You may even live in a home built from seed plants. The wood that makes your home could be oak, pine, or even maple trees. In addition to that, seed plants produce much of the oxygen that we all enjoy breathing. Seed plants share two important characteristics. So these are very important. They have vascular tissue and they use pollen and seeds to reproduce. In addition, all seed plants have body plans that include roots, stems, and leaves. So, like seedless plants, seed plants have complex life cycles that include the sporophyte and the gametophyte stages. In seed plants, the plants that you see are the sporophytes. The gametophytes are microscopic. Let's look at vascular tissue. So, most seed plants live on land, and recall that land plants face many challenges, including standing upright and supplying all of their cells with food and water. And like ferns, seed plants meet these two challenges with vascular tissue. The thick walls of the cells in the vascular tissue help support the plants. In addition, food, water, and nutrients are transported through the plant's vascular tissue. Now, there are two different types of vascular tissue, so you might want to write these down. The first one is phloem, and that's spelled Phloem. That's one of your vocabulary words. And it sounds like an F instead of a PH. That PH makes an F sound. So it's called phloem. And phloem is the vascular tissue through which food moves. When food is made in the leaves, it enters the phloem and travels to other parts of the plant. Water and minerals, on the other hand, travel in the vascular tissue called xylem. This is another vocabulary word. Xylem is spelled Xylem, and we pronounce it xylem, like a Z. So the roots absorb water and minerals from the soil. These materials enter the root's xylem and move upward into the stems and leaves. So the phloem moves food through the tissue throughout, so it can move side to side from one side of the plant to the other, and can even travel downwards. The xylem carries materials upwards, nutrients and water, for example. So that's the difference. Phloem flows from side to side and downwards. Xylem is kind of like an elevator, if you will, that carries things up to the top. So that's vascular tissue. Now let's talk about the pollen and seeds. So unlike seedless plants, seed plants can live in a wide variety of environments. Recall that seedless plants need water in their surroundings for fertilization to occur. Seed plants don't need water for sperm to swim to the eggs. Instead, seed plants produce pollen. Pollen are these tiny structures, and by the way, pollen is one of your vocabulary words as well. So that's the third one. We're really cranking out the vocab words now. But pollen are tiny structures that contain the cells that will later become sperm cells. Pollen delivers sperm cells directly near the eggs. And after sperm cells fertilize the eggs, then seeds develop. A seed, vocabulary word number 4, a seed is a structure that contains a young plant inside of a protective covering. Seeds protect the young plant from drying out. All right, now let's take a look at how seeds become new plants. So we'll look a little more in depth into the structure of seeds. And you can see the image that I'm showing here on the screen, and it shows you all of the different parts of the seed and different types of seeds for that matter. We got corn, bean, and pines. All right, so all seeds share important similarities. And inside a seed is a partially developed plant. If a seed happens to land in an area where conditions are favorable, the plant sprouts out of the seed and begins to grow. So a seed has three main parts. It has an embryo, it has stored food, and it has a seed coat. Those are the three main parts of the seed. And the young plant that develops from the zygote or fertilized egg is called the embryo. The embryo already has the beginnings of roots, stems, and leaves. In the seeds of most plants, the embryo stops growing when it is quite small. When the embryo begins to grow again, it uses the food stored in the seed until it can make its own food through photosynthesis, of course. And in all seeds, the embryo has one or more seed leaves or cotyledons. That's a really tricky word. So, embryo, by the way, we'll back up a little bit. Embryo is one of our vocab words. So, you want to get the definition of that. That's the fertilized egg. And then we have the cotyledons. It's a weird word, I know, but it's spelled Cotyledons. And we say it cotyledons. And in some seeds, food is stored in the cotyledons, although in others, food is stored outside the embryo. So the image again compares the structure of those three different seeds, the corn, bean, and the pine seeds. And the outer covering of the seed, that's called the seed coat we mentioned before. And some familiar seed coats are the skins on lima beans and peanuts, if you've ever eaten those. The seed coat acts like plastic wrap in a sense. It protects the embryo and its food, the food for the embryo. It keeps that from drying out. And this allows a seed to remain inactive for a long period of time. In many plants, the seeds are surrounded by a structure that we call fruit. Now let's move on to how seeds get dispersed. In other words, how they get spread out. So basically, after seeds have formed, which we just talked about, they're usually scattered, sometimes far from where they were produced. The scattering of seeds is called seed dispersal. Seeds are dispersed in a lot of different ways. One method involves other organisms. For example, some animals eat fruits, such as cherries or grapes. The seeds inside the fruits pass through the animal's digestive system and are deposited in new areas. And then other seeds are enclosed in barb-like structures that hook onto an animal's fur or a person's clothes. And then these structures then fall off of the fur or clothes in a new area. A second means of dispersal is by water. Water can disperse seeds that fall into oceans and rivers, or streams or creeks. And a third dispersal method, of course, is by wind. So, wind can disperse lightweight seeds that often have structures that catch the wind, such as those of dandelions and maple trees. We always call them, as kids, we call them helicopters, the maple tree seeds, because they have that wing on them and they spin when they come down, when they fall from the trees. And so we would pick handfuls of them up, throw them up in the air, and watch them spin. It's really fun. So go try that sometime. Finally, some plants eject their seeds in a way that might remind you of popping popcorn. The force scatters the seeds in many directions, and you can see some of those examples of seed dispersal in this image that's on the screen now. All right, last topic for this lesson is germination. And after a seed is dispersed, it may remain inactive for a while before it germinates. Germination, one of your vocabulary words, is spelled Germination, and it's pronounced germination. And this occurs when the embryo begins to grow again and pushes out of the seed. Germination begins when the seed absorbs water from the environment. Then the embryo uses its stored food to begin to grow. As shown in the image here on the screen, the embryo's roots first grow downward, then its stems and leaves grow upward. Once you can see a plant's leaves, the plant is called a seedling. A seed that is dispersed far from its parent plant has a better chance of survival. When a seed doesn't have to compete with its parent for light, water, and nutrients, it has a better chance of becoming a seedling.